Eric's world shattered at 14. The night his father's fist slammed into the kitchen table. His voice a venomous roar. "No son of mine will be a fag." The words cut deeper than the bruises. And by dawn, Eric stood on a frostbitten Chicago sidewalk, clutching a black trash bag stuffed with clothes, his breath visible in the bitter air. He was alone, exiled from the only home he'd known, with nothing but the echo of rejection ringing in his ears. The city was a beast, its skyscrapers looming like indifferent giants as Eric wandered, his sneakers worn thin, the trash bag slung over his shoulder. He was a lanky kid, all sharp angles and wary hazel eyes, his dark hair falling into his face as he ducked into an alley to escape the wind. Hunger gnawed at him, but worse was the shame he didn't understand, shame for loving in a way his family couldn't accept. He found shelter under a rusted fire escape, curling up against a dumpster, the trash bag his only shield against the cold. Sleep was fleeting, broken by the clatter of bottles and the distant wail of sirens. Yet, even in that desolate moment, a spark flickered in Eric's chest, a stubborn refusal to let the world define him. By morning, he was scavenging, digging through restaurant bins for half-eaten sandwiches, his pride warring with survival. A diner waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Marge, caught him behind her shop. Instead of shooing him away, she handed him a warm coffee and a bagel, her voice soft but firm. "You don't belong out here, kid. Find a place to go." Her words were a lifeline. And Eric, swallowing his fear, asked about shelters. Marge pointed him to a youth center in Uptown, a place called Haven House, known for taking in kids like him, kids the world had tossed aside. Haven House was a squat brick building, its walls plastered with flyers about acceptance and pride. Inside, it smelled of cheap coffee and hope, a chaotic sanctuary of teens laughing, arguing, and healing. Eric was wary, his trust battered, but a counselor named Sam, a wiry man with a rainbow pin on his jacket, saw the fear in Eric's eyes and sat him down. "You're safe here," Sam said, his voice steady. "You're not alone." For the first time in days, Eric felt his shoulders loosen, though the weight of his past clung like damp clothes. Life at Haven House wasn't easy. Eric shared a room with 3 other boys, each with their own scars, some from families, some from the streets. He learned to navigate the pecking order, keeping his head down but his eyes sharp. School was a distant memory. Survival was his education now. He took odd jobs, washing dishes, sweeping floors, saving every penny in a tin can under his bunk. The other kids teased him for it, calling him Scrooge, but Eric didn't care. He had a plan, vague but burning. He'd build something no one could take away. At 16, Eric landed a job at a small print shop, run by a gruff but fair man named Carlos. The shop was a cluttered haven of ink and paper, and Eric loved the rhythm of the machines, the way they turned chaos into order. Carlos saw his hunger to learn and taught him the basics of design, letting him tinker with old graphic software. Eric was a natural, his hand steady, his eye for detail sharp. Late at night, he'd sketch logos on scraps of paper, dreaming of a future where he wasn't just surviving, but creating. But the streets hadn't let go of him entirely. One night, walking home from the shop, Eric was jumped by a group of older teens, their slurs cutting as sharply as their fists. He fought back, fueled by years of bottled rage. But he took a beating, his lips split, his ribs aching. Limping back to Haven House, he refused to cry. Instead, he channeled the pain into his work, sketching bolder designs, each stroke a defiance of the world that tried to break him. He started selling small prints at local markets, his art raw and vibrant, catching the eye of passers-by. It wasn't much, but it was a foundation built on grit. By 18, Eric was out of Haven House, renting a tiny room in a rundown apartment with 2 other former shelter kids. He enrolled in community college, juggling classes with his job at the print shop. His designs were gaining traction, shared on early social media platforms, and he began freelancing for small businesses. But love was a risk he hadn't dared take. The memory of his father's words still burned, making him wary of connection. That changed when he met Julian. Julian was a barista at a coffee shop near Eric's college. A 20-year-old with blonde hair that caught the light and a smile that felt like summer. He was openly gay, unapologetic, his confidence a quiet rebellion against a world that often pushed back. Eric noticed him first for his laugh, bright and unguarded, as he bantered with customers. One rainy afternoon, Julian slid a free coffee across the counter, a napkin tucked underneath with a scribbled note. "Your designs are dope. Want to chat art sometime?" Eric's heart raced, his old fears clashing with a new, fragile hope. Their first conversation stretched late into the night, the coffee shop empty except for them. Julian spoke of his dreams to be a photographer, capturing the beauty in overlooked places. Eric shared his sketches, hesitant at first, but Julian's enthusiasm was infectious. They talked about their pasts, Julian's supportive but distant family, Eric's exile at 14. For the first time, Eric felt seen, not as a kid from the streets, but as someone with a future. When Julian reached for his hand, Eric didn't pull away. Eric and Julian's connection deepened, a slow burn of trust and stolen moments. They'd meet after Eric's classes, wandering Chicago's streets, sharing cheap tacos and dreams. Julian's camera was always in hand, snapping photos of graffiti-covered walls or Eric's profile against the skyline. Eric felt alive in a way he hadn't since he was a kid, before the world turned cruel. But love, even one as bright as theirs, wasn't a shield against the past. Eric's designs were gaining buzz, his freelance gigs turning into steady clients, local cafes, boutiques, even a small theater company. He saved obsessively, his tin can now a bank account, but the fear of losing everything lingered. Julian noticed it, the way Eric tensed when money was tight or flinched at loud voices. "You don't have to carry it all alone," Julian said one night, their legs tangled on Eric's lumpy mattress. Eric wanted to believe him, but the trash bag days were etched into his bones. Trouble came in the form of Marcus, a former shelter kid who'd never left the street's grip. Marcus was all charm and sharp edges, his smile a warning. He'd been jealous of Eric's drive back at Haven House, and now, spotting Eric's rising success, he wanted a piece. He cornered Eric outside the print shop, offering protection for his growing business in exchange for a cut. Eric refused, his voice steady but his pulse racing. Marcus laughed, a cold sound, and promised trouble. That night, Eric's apartment was broken into, his laptop smashed, his latest design stolen. The message was clear: The streets didn't let go easily. Eric was shaken but unbowed. He rebuilt, working late nights at the college computer lab, recreating his lost work. Julian stayed by his side, bringing coffee and quiet encouragement. "You're stronger than they know," Julian whispered, his hand on Eric's shoulder. Together, they brainstormed a bold move. Eric would launch his own design brand, something raw and real, rooted in his story. He called it Trash to Triumph, a nod to the bag he'd carried at 14. The name was a risk, but so was everything Eric had done to survive. The launch was scrappy, held in a borrowed warehouse with Julian's photos as the backdrop. Eric's designs, bold logos, vibrant posters, told stories of resilience, each piece a fragment of his journey. The event drew a small but passionate crowd, artists, activists, and a few curious locals. A boutique owner named Lena, a black woman with a keen eye for talent, offered to stock Eric's prints in her store. It was his first real break, and as he shook her hand, Julian's proud grin lit up the room. But Marcus wasn't done. He showed up at the launch, his presence a dark cloud. He didn't cause a scene, just watch from the shadows, his eyes promising more trouble. Eric felt the weight of his gaze, but refused to let it dim the night. He and Julian danced to a scratchy pop song, their bodies close, the world fading away. For a moment, Eric believed he could outrun his past. The next week, Marcus escalated. He spread rumors online, claiming Eric's designs were stolen, tagging clients and stirring doubt. Eric's inbox filled with cancellations, his fragile momentum crumbling. He sank into despair. The old shame creeping back. Was he still just the kid with the trash bag, unworthy of more? Julian found him on the apartment roof, staring at the city lights. "You're not that kid anymore," Julian said, his voice fierce. "You're a fighter. We'll fight this together." They did. Julian used his photography skills to document Eric's process, posting videos online to counter Marcus's lies. Eric doubled down, creating new designs, each one sharper, bolder. He reached out to Lena, who stood by him, promoting his work to her network. Slowly, the tide turned. Clients returned, drawn to Eric's authenticity, his story of survival resonating in a city full of dreamers. By 21, Eric's brand was growing, his prints now in stores across Chicago. He and Julian moved into a small loft, their first real home together. It was modest, but it was theirs, filled with Julian's photos and Eric's sketches. They celebrated with a quiet dinner, just the two of them, toasting with cheap wine. Eric looked at Julian, his heart full, and realized love wasn't just a risk, it was his strength. Eric's brand, Trash to Triumph, became a beacon for those who'd been cast aside. His designs, gritty, vibrant, unapologetic, spoke to the underdogs, the dreamers, the ones who'd clawed their way up. By 22, he was hiring other young artists, many from shelters like Haven House, giving them a chance he'd fought for. But success didn't erase the shadows. Marcus was still out there, a ghost from the streets, and Eric's past was a wound that never fully healed. Julian was his anchor, his laughter a balm against the chaos. They'd built a life together, their loft a sanctuary of art and love. But Eric's drive came at a cost. He worked late, fueled by fear that it could all vanish. Julian noticed the strain, The way Eric's eyes darted when his phone pinged with a new order. "You don't have to prove anything," Julian said one night, his hands cupping Eric's face. "You've already won." Eric nodded, but the kid with the trash bag still whispered in his mind, "Keep going, or you'll lose it all." Trouble brewed when Eric landed a major client, a San Francisco tech startup wanting a full rebrand. It was a chance to go national, but it meant relocating. Julian was hesitant. Chicago was home, where his photography was gaining traction. Eric saw the move as a leap towards stability, a way to secure their future. They argued, their first real fight, voices sharp in the quiet loft. "I can't keep chasing your ghosts," Julian said, his eyes wet. Eric felt the words like a punch, but he didn't back down. "This is for us," he insisted. In the end, Julian agreed, his love for Eric outweighing his doubts. San Francisco was a whirlwind. The city was alive, its streets pulsing with color and possibility. Eric's client, a startup called NextGen, was impressed by his raw talent and story. They gave him creative control, a budget that made his head spin. He rented a small studio, hiring a team of local artists, many queer, many from marginalized backgrounds. Trash to Triumph was no longer just a brand. It was a movement. Julian, meanwhile, found work shooting for a local magazine, his photos capturing the city's vibrant LGBTQ+ scene. But Marcus followed. He'd tracked Eric's success online, his jealousy festering. One night, Eric's studio was vandalized, spray paint on the walls, computers smashed. A note was left, "You can't escape the streets." Eric's team was shaken, but he rallied them, cleaning up the mess himself, his hands trembling with rage. Julian was there, camera in hand, documenting the aftermath. "This is your story," he said. "Show them you're unbreakable." Eric nodded, channeling the attack into a new campaign, turning the vandalism into art, spray-painted designs that screamed defiance. The campaign went viral, Trash to Triumph trending on social media. Eric's story, thrown out at 14, rising from nothing, capture hearts. Donations poured in, enough to fund a scholarship for queer youth in the arts. Eric and Julian stood together at the launch event, their hands clasped, the city's skyline glittering behind them. But the victory was bittersweet. Eric's relentless pace was straining their relationship. Julian missed the quiet moments, the nights when it was just them and a sketch pad. "I'm proud of you," Julian said, his voice soft. "But I need you, not the empire." Eric promised to slow down, but the empire demanded more. A New York gallery offered him a solo show, a chance to cement his name. It meant weeks apart from Julian, who couldn't leave his magazine job. Eric went, driven by the need to prove he was more than his past. The show was a triumph, critics praising his raw, emotional designs. But late at night, alone in a sterile hotel room, Eric felt the cost. He called Julian, his voice cracking. "I miss you," he admitted. Julian's silence was heavy. Then, "I miss you too. Come home." Back in San Francisco, Eric tried to reconnect with Julian, but the distance lingered. They were still in love, their touches tender, their laughter real, but Julian's eyes held a quiet hurt. Eric's empire was thriving. Trash to Triumph now had contracts with major brands, its message of resilience resonating nationwide. Yet, The more Eric built, the more he felt Julian slipping away. He'd promised to slow down, but the demands of success were relentless. Marcus struck again, this time online. He hacked Eric's business accounts, leaking client emails and mocking his story with cruel memes. The attack was personal, a reminder of the street's long reach. Eric's team scrambled to contain the damage, but the betrayal cut deep. He confided in Lena, who'd become a mentor, her boutique now a flagship for his designs. "You've faced worse," she said, her voice steady. "Don't let him steal your joy." Eric nodded. But the weight of it all, Marcus, the Empire, Julian, threatened to crush him. He threw himself into work, launching a new line inspired by San Francisco's queer history. The designs were bold, colorful, a celebration of love and defiance. Julian helped, shooting campaign photos at iconic spots like the Castro. Working together reignited their spark, their hands brushing as they reviewed proofs, their smiles tentative but real. One night, under the neon glow of a bar, Julian pulled Eric close, whispering, "I'm still here. Don't forget that." Eric held him tighter, vowing to balance love and ambition. But the past wasn't done with him. Marcus, emboldened, confronted Eric at a community event, his voice loud, accusing Eric of selling out his roots. The crowd grew tense, and Eric's heart pounded, the old fear of being exposed as less than surging back. Julian stepped in, his presence calm but firm, defusing the situation. Later, alone, Eric broke down, the years of survival crashing over him. "I'm scared I'll never be enough," he admitted to Julian, tears falling. Julian held him, his voice steady. "You're enough for me." With Julian's support, Eric took a stand. He pressed charges against Marcus, a decision that felt like betraying the streets but was necessary to protect his future. The legal battle was draining, but it gave Eric clarity. He restructured Trash to Triumph, delegating more to his team, freeing time for Julian. They started small traditions, Sunday hikes, late-night talks, rebuilding their bond. Eric's designs grew more personal, reflecting not just his pain, but his hope. The scholarship program expanded, now supporting dozens of queer youth. Eric spoke at fundraisers, sharing his story, his voice steady despite the nerves. He and Julian moved to a larger apartment, a space filled with their art, their love. But the Empire's demands never stopped. A major retailer offered a partnership, a chance to go global, but it meant more travel, more time apart. Julian was supportive but honest. "I want this for you," he said, "but I need us too." Eric wrestled with the choice. The kid with the trash bag screaming to seize every opportunity, while the man he'd become longed for stability. He chose a middle path, negotiating a deal that kept him in San Francisco most of the time. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. He and Julian celebrated with a trip to Big Sur, standing on cliffs overlooking the ocean, their hands clasped, the wind carrying their laughter. Eric's empire grew, but so did his resolve to keep Julian close. Trash to Triumph was now a recognized name, its designs in stores from San Francisco to New York. The scholarship program was thriving, with young artists calling Eric their inspiration. Yet, he never forgot the streets, the cold nights, the trash bag. He poured that memory into his work, ensuring every design carried a piece of his truth. Marcus's trial was a turning point. He was convicted of vandalism and cybercrimes, sentenced to community service and restitution. Eric didn't gloat. He felt no victory in seeing another broken soul fall. Instead, he offered Marcus a chance to work at Trash to Triumph, a supervised role to create rather than destroy. Marcus refused, his pride too raw, but Eric left the door open. "Hate doesn't heal," he told Julian later, his voice soft. Julian nodded, proud but unsurprised. Life with Julian settled into a rhythm. They hosted art nights in their apartment, inviting young creatives to share ideas. Eric mentored, his hazel eyes bright with purpose, while Julian captured the moments with his camera. Their love was a quiet strength, tested but enduring. Yet, Eric's past still haunted him. A letter arrived from his father, the first in a decade. It was brief, a half-hearted apology, claiming he'd changed. Eric stared at the words, his heart a tangle of anger and longing. He didn't respond, but the letter shook him. Julian noticed, pulling him into a long talk on their balcony, the city humming below. "You don't owe him anything," Julian said, his hand on Eric's. "But you deserve peace." Eric decided to write back, not for his father, but for himself. The letter was short, honest. "I've built a life without you. I'm happy." He mailed it, feeling lighter, the trash bag's weight finally easing. The retailer partnership launched, with Trash to Triumph's designs in major stores. Eric's story was featured in a national magazine, Julian's photos alongside it. The article called him the voice of the rejected, a title he wore with quiet pride. He and Julian attended the launch party, their hands linked, their smiles a shared victory. But success brought new pressures. Investors pushed for a faster expansion, urging Eric to franchise the brand. He resisted, wary of losing the soul of what he'd built. One night, a fire broke out at the studio. It was small, contained quickly, but the damage was a blow: lost designs, scorched equipment. Arson was suspected, though no proof tied it to Marcus. Eric stood among the ashes, Julian at his side, and felt the old fear creep in. But he'd faced worse. He rallied his team, crowdfunding to rebuild. The community responded, donations pouring in, proving Trash to Triumph was more than a brand. It was a movement. Eric and Julian took a weekend to escape, driving to Yosemite. Under starlit skies, they talked about their future, not just the empire, but them. Eric admitted his fear of losing Julian to his ambition. Julian laughed, his eyes soft. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, kissing Eric's forehead. They made a pact. No matter how big Trash to Triumph grew, they'd always choose each other. At 26, Eric stood at the helm of an empire he'd built from nothing. Trash to Triumph was a household name, its designs a symbol of resilience, its scholarships changing lives. Eric's story inspired thousands, his face on billboards, his voice at conferences. But the true victory was the life he'd carved with Julian, a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. The studio fire had been a setback, but it galvanized Eric. He rebuilt, incorporating the charred remains into a new line, designs that turned destruction into beauty. The launch was a triumph, held in the Castro, with queer youth showcasing their art alongside Eric's. Julian's photos capture the night, his lens finding light in every face. Eric watched him work, his heart swelling. This was home, not the streets, not the empire, but them. Eric faced one final ghost, his family. His mother reached out, her voice trembling on the phone, asking to meet. Eric hesitated, the pain of 14 still raw. Julian urged him to go, not for her, but for closure. They met in a quiet Chicago diner. Eric now a man, his mother older, softer. She apologized, tears falling, but Eric felt distant. "I forgive you," he said, meaning it, "but I don't need you." He walked away, Julian waiting outside, their hands finding each other. The past was done. Trash to Triumph expanded, but Eric set boundaries, prioritizing his team and his life with Julian. They bought a small house in San Francisco, a place filled with art and laughter. Eric mentored more youth. His story a beacon: you can rise, you can love, you can heal. Julian's photography career soared, his work in galleries, but he always came home to Eric. One evening, on a rooftop overlooking the city, Eric proposed. It was simple, no grand gesture, just a ring and a question. Julian said yes, his smile brighter than the skyline. They married in a small ceremony, surrounded by friends, artists, and the kids they'd mentored. Eric's vows were raw, honest. "You saw me when I was nothing. You're my everything." Julian's were simple. "I choose you. Always." Years later, Eric looked back on the boy with a trash bag. That kid had built an empire, not of wealth, but of meaning. Trash to Triumph wasn't just a brand. It was a promise that no one is defined by their rejection. Eric and Julian grew old together, their home a haven for new generations of dreamers. The streets that had cast Eric out were now the canvas for his legacy, a testament to love, resilience, and the power of rising above.